Hello. Today in English Literature with Susan, I'm here with you with a reading and analysis of W. Auden's poem, The Unknown Citizen, together with an explanation of two literary terms used extensively in this poem, irony and rhetorical question. W. Auden migrated from United Kingdom to United States, and that experience was a shock. Auden could no more live in England because of his political tendencies, let's say his orientation towards communism and Marxist viewpoints. He was a red flag kind of for the English government and also for his sexual orientation. So he preferred to leave England and to continue his life in the United States. The poem is written almost immediately after his settlement in the United States, and he was shocked by the consumerist society of America. He could not imagine that a society could waste money, could produce things and buy things they don't like or they don't need actually. As a person with some Marxist attitude, it was a shock. Therefore, he wrote the poem "The Unknown Citizen" to show that a shock. Let's go through the text of the poem. First of all, we should know about the significance of the title of this poem, "Why the Unknown Citizen." Let me briefly explain things to you. So the poem starts like this. It is dedicated to JS/07/M378. Well, this is the way that the soldiers are sometimes named and identified in the army, especially when they are dead in a battle or something. And the unknown citizen is like a soldier, so he can somehow identify with the unknown soldier, with the difference that the unknown soldier had fought for his country in a battlefield, but now the unknown citizen is serving his country there in his own country. But both of them are the same. They are serving the great community, the government of the United States. So his identity, his first name and his surname, are not important. What is important is what he's doing. Therefore, he's just known for his ID by his ID number to the government. So he is an equal to that unknown soldier because I told you. Both of them are devotees to the state, and then he says this marble monument is erected by the state. So, as the government has erected and built a monument for the unknown soldier like this, in the world of this poet, the government has also erected a monument for this citizen. And throughout the text of the poem, never United States is named, but we know from the background of the poem, from what is known about this poem, from Auden's notes and Auden's explanations, that this is about the United States, and there are many references which show this throughout the text of the poem. So both of them are kind of embodiments of the ideal citizen, both the soldier who fought in the battlefield and the one who is working and living in the country, but with the purpose of providing some service for the society, let's say, favorable to the government. So the poem starts like this after the brief introduction and the dedication of the poem. He was found by the Bureau of Statistics to be one against whom there was no official complaint. So we line by line we're reading the characteristics, the features of an ideal citizen, one against whom there was no official complaint, and this is very important. So this the citizen is submissive. The citizen accepts everything he's forced into, and all the reports on his conduct agree that in the modern sense of an old-fashioned word he was a saint, for in everything he did he served the greater community. So the greater community with a capital G and a capital C is a reference to the government of the United States. And what about this? The modern sense of an old-fashioned word. In the Middle Ages, during the medieval times, uh, there were saints. The saints were devoted to God, so they did everything for God's sake. And here, this old-fashioned term has taken a modern sense, a person who is also a devotee, like a saint, but the addressee, the goal of this devotion has changed from God to the greater community. So that's why he's a saint in a modern sense of an old-fashioned word. The term itself is an old-fashioned one, but now a new meaning is connotated by this term in the context of the American society. And other characteristics, except for the war, till the day he retired, he worked in a factory and never got fired. So, except for the war means that he has attended the war, he has took part in it for the sake of the country. So he's a full-fledged soldier. At home and abroad, except for the war, till the day he retired, he worked in a factory and never got fired. Another important thing, he doesn't like skirmishes, he doesn't like quarrels or things like that. Has never got fired, but satisfied his employers, Fudge Motors Incorporation. Fudge, we know, fudge like chocolate fudge. But here Auden is making a reference actually to most probably Ford Motors Incorporation. Maybe because I'm sorry, Ford was the first maybe modern factory, modern car producing factory in the United States. Ford introduced the assembly line, so made the production of in this industry, let's say, faster and more agreeable. So maybe it's a sign, it's a mark, at least at the time the poem is written in 1939, of the American economic growth. Yet he wasn't a scab or odd in his views. He doesn't go to the strikes, though he's part of a union, he's not just breaking any kinds of laws or odd and his views. Odd in his views is a reference to communism. There was a phenomenon called at the time the Red Scare, that the American government banished many of the people who actually, or deported them, who were actually uh, attributed to the communist movement, or they identified with the views of the movement, or somehow they showed some tendencies. So that Odd and his views is a reference to that political tendency. For his union reports that he paid his dues, he's part of a workers' union, but he's not part of the proletariat of the world united. No, he's just part of that, and he pays his dues. It's important. He pays, but he's not a scab. Our report on his union shows it was sound, and you see everything is closely watched by the government, that everyone is controlled. And our social psychology workers found that he was popular with his mates and liked to drink. This is also important, not only from the psychological sense of the term, but also because if you like a drink, it means that you just buy it on a regular basis. So you pay, and this is very important in capitalist society. And you see the irony in all these words. Auden means a critique of every one of these aspects. The press are convinced. The press are convinced that he bought a paper every day. Just check the wording of the poem. He bought a paper. He doesn't read a paper, or reading the paper is not important. He buys a paper. The press are convinced that he buys a paper every day. And that is reactions to advertisements published in those newspapers. to advertisements were normal in every way. In a capitalist society, a normal reaction to advertisement is to buy. So he buys the advertised goods. Policies taken out in his name prove that he was fully insured, and his health card shows he was once in hospital but left it cured. So it's a win-win kind of condition that for all his life he has paid for the insurance and the system. Therefore, the system returns back his health to him. So he pays and he once uses the hospital. Okay, so everything is equal between the two cases. And now let's go to his home. Both producers research and high grade living declare. Producers research and high grade living, these are not real institutions, but in the reality of the context in which the poem is written, there were such institutions. They gave advice and suggestions to people who wanted to buy something. For example, you wanted a car, and you went to them. You said, "Okay, I have this amount of money. I afford this, and okay, I have this and that. Okay, how I can buy a car and which car is the best option for me?" And they replied. So they both producers, research and high grade living declare he was fully sensible to the advantages of installment plan. So he constantly goes to these institutions. Why? Because there is something called installment plan. What is installment plan? It was actually a policy taken by the American government at the time after the Great Depression, the Great Economic Depression, that through which people could buy things in installments. For example, they could own homes, they could own cars, but for the rest of their life, they were kind of paying the debts. So you're always paying and paying and paying and had everything necessary to the modern man. And here we see the irony in Davich's Auden's language. He thinks that these are not necessary things for a modern man. Actually, and don't compare the time with our own time. Maybe today, all of these things are or their modern versions are necessary, but not at the time, according to him. They were luxuries. Just a phonograph. A phonograph is a gramophone, a radio, a car, and a frigidaire. Frigidaire is a term used for refrigerator in the United States because of the first company which produced refrigerators was called Frigidaire, and then people use the term instead. So other things that these are not actually necessary things for a modern man. About his political attitudes or the public opinion, researchers into public opinion are content that he held the proper opinions for the time of the year. Time of year. So his opinions depend on what the government wishes his opinions to be. When there was peace, he was for peace. When there was war, he went. So he's not maybe a supporter of peace or an advocate of war. It depends. He was married and added 5 children to the population, which our eugenists says was the right number for a parent of his generation because that generation was coming just out of a Great Depression, economic depression. So there was a baby boom, and okay, he's just supporting the policy. And our teachers report that he never interfered with their education. So he never interferes with what they teach to their children. The system is controlling the education of his children, actually. Was he free? Was he happy? The question is absurd. Had anything been wrong? We should certainly have heard. So, without asking that person, without even identifying that person with his name, all we know that he's happy, he's free, but these questions are actually rhetorical questions. It means that Auden means that he is not free, he is not happy in the actual sense of the term. So these questions may lead us to a discussion of the literary term rhetorical question. This technique is actually used to emphasize the point. For example, instead of saying it's a shame, we would say, "Is it not a shame?" And this makes the idea more accentuated, let's say. So it's a sentence in a grammatical form of a question, just a grammatical form. It's not asked to request information to invite a reply. So it's not serving the usual, let's say, function of a question. It's grammatically just a question, but not. It's actually informing us about something instead of asking for information. The goal is to achieve a greater expressive force than a direct assertion. So because the question has more force or more powerful, it's used instead of a direct sentence or just an informative kind of assertion. Another technique used extensively in this poem is irony. Let us have a general definition of the term. It means hiding what is actually the case to achieve special rhetorical artistic effects. So we don't say what we should say directly, we use an indirect way of saying it, and this is called an irony. But irony has different types. Verbal irony, which is used in this poem in many occasions, means saying something and meaning something else. Like what Dawish Auden told about of the necessary things for a modern man, or when he was talking about everything related to that person, our social psychology workers and things like that. He's ironical. He's actually laughing or criticizing these ideas. Dramatic irony. It is called dramatic irony because it was used at the time of the ancient Greek dramatists. Oedipus Rex as a play is the maybe the most well-known example. In case of Oedipus, for example, everyone knew that Oedipus is the murderer of his father. The only one who didn't know that was Oedipus himself. So the audience and the author share the knowledge of something, while the main character do not know about it. So this is called dramatic irony, and it is called dramatic for the reason I mentioned. A situational irony, or the irony of situation, means a type of irony in which something is expected, but its opposite happens. Um, an example is the short story called Green Leaf. In that short story, there is a woman who wants to kill a cow, but in a case of situational irony, the cow kills the woman. So the opposite thing happens. Or in the story An Hour by Kate Chopin, the short story, everyone is expecting the man to be dead, but at the end of the story, the woman is dead. So this is called situational irony. Structural irony is a kind of extended irony. The irony is extended throughout the whole text. So instead of uh, just saying or using some sentences which are ironical, there is actually someone in the story or a character in the story who's serving that purpose. A naive narrator, for example, is in there, and throughout the text, he or she says things whose opposite are actually true. A good example is is A Modest Proposal by Samuel. I'm sorry. All of a sudden, I forgot the name of the writer of A Modest Proposal. I'm so sorry. In A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. Sorry, Swift introduces a naive narrator or a naive speaker. He thinks that killing and eating the children of Ireland would be a solution to the problems of the country. Okay, you know, such a solution is not a solution at all. But that naive narrator uh, just defends and supports his idea all the time. And we know whatever he says, the opposite is true. Socratic irony means to assume a pose of ignorance and asking questions. Why do we know the answer? We ask many questions. So you appear to be naive, but you're not actually. A cosmic irony, also called the irony of fate, is a kind of irony in which the deity, the gods are manipulating the events and the characters, and the character remains hopeful every time, but his or her hopes are shattered. A good case in point is the novels written by Thomas Hardy. For example, the novel Tess of the D'Urberville. Tess is always facing, let's say, bright maybe situations, but at the end of the day, they are all dark. So this is how the fate is playing with her, and even in the text of the novel, Thomas Hardy says, now the president of the immortals had done his portrait test. So the president of the immortals, the deity, present in the novel, is manipulating the life of the character Tess. Also, we have romantic irony, used most of the times by the romantic poets, especially we can say Lord Byron. Byron produces heroes like Don John, if we can call them heroes, or Childe Harold. Um, at first, we want to believe what they say, but as we read them, we know that it's just an illusion. Or Byron's narrator in Don John is the same case. He actually says many things that we may identify with the figure of Lord Byron, but there are deviations or hints in the text so that we cannot fully identify that narrator with the figure of Lord Byron, or even in the case of John himself, we can do that. We may think that Don John or Childe Harold are Lord Byron, but there are traces in the text that show the opposite. So there is an illusion constantly produced, which seems to be reality, but every time we believe in it, the writer changes his mind or her mind, and things are also changed with it. So this was my explanation. I hope you've enjoyed.